In this video, I want to show a fun feature of Table.Transform column, where you can use a function to transform the column, but without passing in any arguments. Normally you'd have to use, for instance, the underscore to say what are you transforming, but there are many functions where that isn't necessary. We can actually already see that if we do a normal transform function, like lowercase, we see here that the function text.lower is applied upon column 1, but we don't specify the underscore. We can write this in manually if we want to for some reason, saying that the function is applied upon each row and taking that row as an argument. But this isn't actually each row, it is the intersection between each row and the column 1. And I think the reason why this works is that Table.Transform columns is an iterator that acts on each row innately, and the second argument is then a list where we can specify what column am I applying this function to, meaning the function has already specified the intersection we have with each row from the Table.Transform columns function and the given column that we're affecting, which is specified here. So it isn't actually necessary to specify what we're applying the function to. We can even write our own function that takes a text as an input and spits something out. So if I copy this step and then I say I want to add a function, and I'm going to add that function inside of the context of this step because I only need it here. So I'll create a function selector, which then takes an input, my text, which goes toward. I only want to select text and not numbers, and also not spaces, which I have at the start of my text. This function then takes my input argument, and I say I want to keep both capital letters and not capital letters. So the list of capital A through Z and the small a through Z. And I don't remember if this includes the Danish letters A, Ö, O, but we can write them in manually. Then I need to remember to close my variable with an in here, and then say instead of using text lower, I'm now using selector.
5 minutes later.
And it seems it got a bit mad when I used the A, Ö, O characters. If I add them back in to show, it says I get an error, probably because I have to add them one character at a time. So I will add them back in to be thorough. Since this function only includes the capital and non-capital letters, this also applies a trim upon my text, which is nice. And like before, I can also add in the each keyword if I want to, but then I have to remember that each is actually syntactic sugar for a function that takes an input argument of an underscore and then goes towards whatever's on the right. So this is valid syntax, but the point of the video is that this isn't necessary. As long as your function takes an input of the text or whatever it is, it could be a number as well, and it outputs a text or number, then this is fine. Lastly, I want to show a situation where you do need the underscore, and that's if you're doing a transformation where you're doing some kind of a calculation. And this is also included in the wiki page for the transform columns function. I'm going to add in a new table where I want to affect the B column. And I want to first increase this number by 1, and then I want to convert it into text. And whenever I do transform columns, I always like having Power Query add the syntax for me, because then it's a bit easier to change. And actually in this case I need to remove this transform column type, because Power Query understands that I can't really apply text.lower to a column with numbers. That is the function it's applying. This doesn't make any sense because I need to remember that I'm making a change to a table. So I need to specify what table am I affecting. And then this will error out because it can't apply a text trim to a column with numbers. Because the actual function I want is I first want to take the value and add 1. And we need to specify the underscore because what am I adding 1 to? If I just try to do it without, like +1, it wouldn't understand what that means because I have to specify a function. So we could specify a function like so, empty brackets, but this also errors because when I'm inside this list and I'm applying a transformation, that already passes in a variable. This will also error out. So I have to specify what am I actually doing here, what operation am I doing. So I will specify a function that takes an argument of the underscore, but I wanted to convert this into a text, so I will wrap this in text.from. And if I remove this part where I specify the new type, it would be any, because originally the column is actually set to any. But since I now know that the column contains text, because this function outputs text, I can specify that the column should be text. So to summarize, if you have a condition like you're doing text.lower or trim or something like a text select that takes an input of text and then outputs something, then you don't have to specify the each or the underscore because Table.Transform columns innately understands that you're trying to change the value of the current row's intersection with this column that you specify in the list. But if you want to transform the value and then do something more with it, then you need to specify the underscore. So, yep,